want to personally introduce Dee Dee Dunphy. I've actually known of Dee Dee since I moved to Athens in 2007. Let's give Dee Dee a round of applause.
So I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you, Torrance Center for Creativity and Talent Development, for hosting me here. I'm absolutely delighted to talk to you all. And I've done something a little different for you. Surprise, surprise! So the title of my lecture is Art is a Verb, so let's do it. Yes, indeed, a lot of my creative practice, whether it's in the field of studio art, product design, curation, art direction, all has to do with process. It all has to do with the fact that I'm engaged and engaging others. But I have some other titles for my lecture. So the first other title is How to Embarrass Myself Tremendously Again and Again. That's another title. Another title is All of the Deep Dark Secrets Are Being Revealed, So Keep a Secret. So what I've decided to do is mix up, instead of doing a linear progression of my career, essentially up until this moment of this lovely lecture, is that I have instead managed a lot of my thinking into chapters with sort of overarching themes of work, of play, and people, and how they all sort of mix and match together. And that at one point I was told by a cinematographer who wanted to use our house on Deering Street for a film. They moved in, an enormous film crew moved in for it seemed like 100 days, for probably 3 seconds in the film. And I said, how do you do these 14, 16-hour days? And he said, well, my work is my play and my play is my work, and I'm with people that I love. So that seemed to be kind of, a quintessential way for me to think about. Let's get started. The artist is working. Embarrassed slide number 1. My degree was in performance art and video. And I did a series of solo performances over a number of years that reflected a critique and sort of smart-ass reference to the male gaze in regards to quintessential female-identified, gender-identified roles, but usually all within the service of others. So this was Nurse Dee Dee, and I studied with a hospital, and I trained with nurses, and I opened up a clinic, and I wrote sick notes. So I could still, do that again, I guess. So moving on in time, you will recognize, is that Georgia Theater? Yeah. Streets of Athens. Again, the artist is working. And this was my crew of grad students, and we decided to populate the streets in downtown Athens by coercing and collaborating with all of the retail vendors to give up their valuable real estate to arts. So yes, that's a wonderful thing. Art and windows downtown, hooray, hooray. But how do you engage your viewers, your participants? Well, we decided to make a parade. So we paraded around for days with flags. And in fact, this week seems to be a big theme of tours at the Linden House. I give a lot of tours. And I started thinking about that I need a flag for the Linden House. So maybe I'll ask a graphic designer to design me one for that. Anyway, so the group works together for the betterment of the neighborhood. Taking care of business, again, old stills from old video pieces. I'm directing participants in an airline. I'm cleaning the floor, mundane activities, And I'm leading the marching band. I think about quintessential pieces like Bruce Naumann's Stomping in the Studio, putting a camera on for that old-fashioned VHS tape, turning that camera on, closed circuit. What does the artist do in the studio? The artist works. If the artist is working, then they're stomping around. Or maybe they're playing a single note on a violin for those 60 minutes. That's work. It's in a studio. I'm an artist and an artist at work. The artist is working. I had the opportunity of sitting with Marina Abramovic, an amazing performance artist, in the large atrium at MoMA in New York. Her piece, The Artist is Present, she sat in the chair and she received visitors to sit with her in silence without breaking gaze of the eyes. And each one of the people who sat with her, it was recorded and it became part of this larger collaborative piece where there was a democracy, that there was this anticipation of sharing. In fact, one of my favorite blogs that came out of this piece was Marina Abramovic Made Me Cry. So the pictures of the people who were crying were picked out, and anyway, it was really fun. Anyway, I sat on day 44 for I was 10th in line, and this was my second time. I had gone there first day, and I stood in line all day. Second day, I got there at 5 in the morning, ran right in. I was number 10, and I sat with her for 41 minutes. This is a black and white photograph, so it doesn't really describe the luscious colors that all came from Betsey Johnson clothing line, and at the time also Esprit. But again, I was luxuriating in a very large studio. What is this box, this studio? How do I manage work in this environment? Especially when the studio had, obviously like coming out of a large-scale abex or minimalist, or it seemed to be rather heavy in the masculine. So I thought, okay, I'm going to turn my studio basically into a sewing factory. So instead of painting stripes down a canvas, I cut them and I sewed them back together like the back of a corset. Or I put in a row of snaps or a zipper. So essentially these very large color-filled paintings could be unzipped, unbuttoned, unlaced, and essentially the structure of modernism could just sort of collapse, metaphorically and physically. So the studio turning into a factory of sewing, dyeing, folding, zipping, buttoning. So it also made me think of another piece that I really enjoy, is Richard Serra's Verb List, which is something that I constantly return to in my career, and you'll see as we go forward, is that he wrote a list: to think, to do, to verb list, verb list, verb list. And it was all around this idea of, again, the artist as laborer. And then I noticed, of course, that there were things that were affiliated with possibly women's work or women's labor were not on there. There was no to sew, or to snap, to fold, to hem, to iron, to dye. So I started thinking about these kinds of activities in my creative practice. My version of abstract expressionism, or maybe a Grateful Dead t-shirt. Okay. Again, trying to reconcile reconsidering the studio as more of a sweatshop and a place where there was labor. Also, cross stitch. This, is done on an Aida cloth fabric, and it's a grid. So it's a very simple vertical and horizontal structure. It is the kind of embroidery that, say, young ladies learned their alphabets and their numerical systems on, when there was a one-room classroom. At the time, I had a baby, my darling Lucy, and my large-scale studio seemed to be kind of bizarre. Like, why was I going to this big hole? I mean, why couldn't I incorporate art into life and life into art in a way that worked successfully? So my studio became a little shaker sewing box, literally. And it would go everywhere with me. I made art on the subways. I made art waiting in line at the grocery. You know, I made art while Lucy was napping. You know, it seemed to be, again, like this interest in turning the practice into a life practice, as well as keeping that same kind of snarky commentary that I've been working on, which is sort of miniaturizing or minimalizing modernism, you know, through female gesture, sewing, tie-dyeing, zipping, etc. So my version of the verb list: to seesaw, to glide, to play, to swing. These are little balance boards, and they're modified after, you know, when surfers train or skateboarders train. Right, Jeannie? So in my curatorial field, those projects that I really enjoy the most are ones where I ask people, select people, not select people, to work with me. And then all of a sudden, the creative practice becomes more play-like, more invitational-like. So this was a project that was here at the school in the Bridge Gallery that Katie sponsored. Thank you, Katie. It was so fun. I made my first screen print. And it was really exciting. It was just a very large notebook paper, and I made a very large clipboard for my very large notebook paper. And it was an edition of 25, and I invited artists to use my large notebook paper as their to-do list, which we all have. They all have some different version. We all have them somewhere, whether it's on our phone electronically, and those who have that, you're so cool, because I haven't gotten there yet. You know, or, you know, little rips of sticky papers or whatever it happens to be. So the idea was that, well, if we're all working in our creative practice anyway, why not call it a day together, and that we start at the same day and we end at the same day, and somehow we're going to find where we crossed paths in our practice, whether it was in life activities or just, you know, art activities or just going to the grocery store. Where could 25 artists overlap in the things that they were doing and engaging in over the course of I think it was a month, I want to say. So in this time, this was in 2016, and this time curating collaborative interventions to sort of understand the garnishing of consensus. And in this case, my material was the invitation. And this is what the show looked like. And you can see it was simply installed with a bunch of clipboards. And visually, it looks very differently because everybody, you know, has their own different, you know, hand in it. We have one rebel who made that paper airplane. Anyway, but the beautiful thing about it was that those who were keeping sort of a diary type of arrangement, which most of them had little elements of that, it was wonderful to see where somebody was doing the same thing over here. Oh, we did laundry on Thursday. Oh my God, we did laundry on Thursday. Like, oh my goodness, like, can we call that like an art practice? Yes, we absolutely can. So who else works? I began this body of work creating these upholstered play forms. I had been reading Barnett Newman's writing, and one very particular quote, and I'll just paraphrase it probably terribly, is that sculpture was something you bumped into when you were backing up to look at a painting. So, okay, we can read all we can in there, okay, one, painting is the higher form, not sculpture. But then I interpreted this as sculpture was pointy and sharp and cold and rough and the things that you wouldn't want to bump into. So I thought, well, what would happen if sculpture was soft and lovely and adorable and that you could wipe it clean with 409? Wouldn't that be amazing? So I started working on these pieces, but the joy of this was the show would arrive and I would leave. So my collaborator was a gallerist. My collaborator is the museum preparators. So I was looking for another kind of partner in this idea of working together to enhance my practice beyond what I was capable of singularly. So in this case, the invitation was to the gallerist. This was a show in Los Angeles, and that wonderful spray of light back there in the window is the 99-cent store where everything is 99 cents. Here's another version of that. Again, somebody arranged it as they saw fit. Okay, so to continue, now the museum staff is getting a little bigger, and in fact the museum staff is maybe inviting their viewers ever so. But as you know, it's very difficult in these high institutions to manage works that encourage you to touch and to play and other things. So there were a lot of sort of negotiations with this piece in particular. This is the big light bright board. It is a stainless steel 4-foot square laser cut pegboard with plastic injection molded pegs in 8 different colors with a light source behind it. Here is a view of it at Arrow, which is now a play place. Arrow Play Place or whatever. The students' work, my students, the artist, Martin Kurcell's works. So again, this wonderful democracy of labor that goes on. Martin was one of our guest artists here, and he's a Los Angeles performance artist. He's probably like 8 feet tall and weighs like 1,000 pounds, and he is the lightest person on his feet that I've ever seen. He is also a performance artist. And he had just learned the term mash down on it, which I didn't know what that was, but now I know. So he decided to write mash on the piece. So when I was teaching, as you saw, some of the students were working with the light board. I was very interested in the material of time. That time comes with duration and is palpable material as much as any object in space. So I started really focusing on this idea of that art was in fact a verb, an activity rather than an object or a thing. So the lessons in a lot of my time-based art courses were essentially a challenge to create a manifesto as a response to each problem that I would set. And my classroom had a time clock. So it was a commitment, it was a contract with students, because when you're doing temporal works, you must be present completely, because then it's vanished. One of the greatest pieces I saw in a gallery so long ago, it was a completely empty gallery, but for a huge projection of just some hands gesturing and random voices telling about performances that they had seen in the Lower East Side that there was no record of, no documentation of. And I went to the desk and I happened to see the gallery guide. Well, the Fantastic Sound System was for sale. So you could buy the sound system, but not the art. So I thought that was pretty great. So we had a time clock. This is Teixeira Sheng a performance artist who I greatly admire, and he does 1 year works. So he punched a clock every hour on the hour for 1 year, and the documentation is incredible. And up here, I'll give snaps to my professor, Linda Montano, who was attached to him by rope for a year. So it was this idea of making a contract with your students, with the process, with the art, with the engaged activity to a degree of commitments. So with that, sometimes you have to train for what you're going to do. So I discovered through my early cross-stitch embroideries that indeed the grid could reflect technology, and that I could create QR codes to scan through embroidery. These are very small. I love seeing it so big. In fact, I wonder if I could get my phone and do like this and it would pull up. So they're very small, but they're super duper labor intensive. It's very time consuming. Ed Ruscha, an artist in LA, once was asked, well, what were you thinking of when you painted that Hollywood sign or that Annie painting? And he said, I can't tell you what I was thinking, but I can tell you what was on TV. So I watched a lot of TV for a long period of time. And as a video artist, this was, oh my gosh, so joyful. Because not only was I free of gadgets, no wires, no sound systems, no things, computers, la 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 la, that basically you became my video equipment, my sound system equipment, and that I was again encouraging participation to a sort of a broader community of people because you were the ones walking around with the device that could make the art work. I'm training at the Ramsey. And here I am, the artist is walking in high heels on the Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson in the Salt Lake in Utah. So thank you to my husband for free labor in filming that. Okay, so just as an example, because this is a Torrance site, I thought I would just show you like some examples of projects that I would give, and essentially they are, challenges, manifestos, disrupt the logic, jump the McDonald's counter and serve up a hamburger. Read the phone book as a poem, like these kinds of challenges. And of course I said, if anybody were to get caught, don't use my name. That was always following. Take a walk, things you might need. Here's the result of one. It's your birthday, where, students would bring in objects, random objects, in these beautiful gifts, and we would give them out, and then as a result of our gift, we would create a performance using whatever was in the mystery box. What's behind door number 1? For a prop. Draw a line. Thank you, Andrea. Justin Rabideau. Write a line. Again, disrupting some kind of gesture in a way that makes the experience temporal. Another temporal piece that ended up to be something that the city, and now I work for the city, It's kind of funny. Looking at the kind of kookiness I used to make the city do. Still doing it. And park in a parking space on top of the parking lot. So, and this was a day where we worked really hard, as you can see. This is a picture of clouds. This was one of my favorite sort of projects that I did with students, and I'll give credit to a graduate student, Sarah Laurentius. I don't know where Sarah is now, but anyway, so I made the challenge. Okay, we've been collaborating, we've been doing these performances, and like feeling of sharing is tremendous. But how else can we build our collaboration? So we came up with the idea that we would collaborate in our dreams. So we structured a very rigorous series of activities over the course of a month to train ourselves, like walking on the running machine at the Ramsey to go on the spiral jetty, training ourselves to dream about ourselves and each other in the classroom environment. There's a book that exists now of all the documentation of the various things that we would do. For an hour a day, we would lie on the ground with our heads touching in a big circle to try to somehow mesh. I don't know. It sounds a little cult-like, actually, now that I'm saying that. So anyway, so this was good night class, and the goal was a big collaborative project to dream about each other as much as possible, and to build that project. So we executed a series of videos and audio tapes that we would listen to at night before we went to bed. We would look at each other's faces and say goodnight, and Sarah would say goodnight, Dee Dee, and all of these various things to try to move ourselves in. And it worked moderately, but it was so great to write the data at the end to see who was dreaming about who in what groups, and whether they were really scary or really naughty, I don't know. A collaborative piece in my curatorial aspect was at Hambidge Residency. If any of you are practicing artists, residencies are just dreamy. They're these opportunities to really focus on just your own work without the complications of regular life, like paying bills and driving to the market kind of thing. Hambidge is 80 years old, and they had asked me to curate their anniversary show, and I thought, how am I going to do this? The Hambidge Fellows, there's millions of them. They're all over the world. How am I going to do this? Well, they happen to have a very big post office box in the middle of the country. And I will say, I lived in a cabin in the middle of the country for 2 weeks. That was something, I will say. I received, when I got there to curate the show, it was like my birthday. I received piles of mail. I was just thinking what the postman was thinking about in Rabun County. He must have thought it was like, I don't know, crazy. Anyway, so it was so wonderful to curate a show where I'm opening all these wonderful artworks, and it seemed like a constant series of gifts. And of course, this is postal art or correspondence art, which comes from a Fluxus history of sharing and using the postal system as your expert collaborator. And this idea of sharing and imagery and passing it back and forth to build a cooperative artwork. Not unlike Exquisite Corpse, which if you ever have played it, it's you fold the paper in 3 and someone does the head, someone does the body, and someone does the lower part, and you unfold it, and it's this fantastic creature or creation, and it's owned by no one and everyone. So that was sort of the genesis of that exhibit. So it's fun to have fun, but you gotta know how. Dr. Seuss. So I started thinking about playtime. I had been, a couple things in my mind was that One, Lucy was growing up, and she was going to school, and it was like, oh my gosh, she's at school. She'd come home, what did you do? What was your favorite thing? Recess. I was like, oh, recess, what's that? And I realized that I didn't have recess, and I was bummed out. I thought, why wouldn't I have recess every day the way that she had it? It was the funnest thing, right? So I started reading some, child development texts, Jean Piaget, about socializing and social growth in a playground field at that age of toddlerhood where you're busy doing your own singular play in your own fantasy fictional world, and then you notice someone over there on the other side of the sandbox. You're like, hey, if I go over there, then my world will only grow and get bigger. So it was this idea of connecting that next level of socializing. So I thought, where's my recess? If I have free time, what am I doing? Answering an email, doing the laundry, blah. So I thought, well, I'm going to make objects that will enhance the idea of recess and encourage the reintroduction of play into, everyday sort of living. So hence I started building a lot of swings. The first one was actually in the one of the galleries that was on Broad Street. This is in the Goat Farm. This was on behalf of Hambidge. And this is now the one that is at the Hambidge Residency. And this was an installation in Madison, which is this wonderful building, which actually happens to be an old school building. So I made these tiara top laser cut frameworks with these very elegant swings with tassels, and they're padded. They're all designed for two, so you can play with others. Now, I do, think it's a pretty object. It's, rather fetish-sized. It's kind of, little Louis XVI with a little something else going on in there. And that looks great, but this is what I'm after. This is the thing that makes my heart go yay, because the object is lovely, but when the people are engaging it, playing on it, swinging on it, then the object becomes itself, its own, and it takes me out of the picture in a way that I find to be, in my practice, very successful and enjoyable. It's sort of with this idea of, here's the hot rod seesaw, my first version of it, 16 feet long. We got those in LA, that's twisted chrome. Yeah. And over here we had to make bumper pads because you must play nice. I started thinking about, again, like another Nauman piece, that big corridor where it was just basically flanking walls with a closed circuit TV set system inside. So basically, the viewer became the subject and the viewed. So it lived up that sculpture in a way that was very unique and more about the verb of art rather than just the object or the noun. So we would have recess nights, and I would invite people. Those are some math people over there. I know those cops. They work for the city. Again, this idea that the objects are lovely, but when they're being engaged, this is when the work, to me, is super fun. So, of course, where did I get that? Another embarrassing photo from a long time ago. We had the pleasure of having my graduate advisor as a Dodge chair here for a while, Paul Koss, who essentially set up a similar structure or the structure that I've adapted really was inspired by Paul. So we would work really hard on our performances and be attuned, and then we would have a blowout in the middle. So we had a bowling league. So we started thinking about play and game and sports and competition in a way that became more like art practice. Can you guess where I am in there? It's about collaborating with your peers, creating parallel systems and work that you can recognize, using competition as a form of collaboration, and a way to develop sociability in the world, and that using, work and play as equal partners, equal rigorous partners. I learned how to play ice hockey. Can you find me in there? I'm wearing a really fabulous head garment. I have no idea what that is. And then here, La Voile d'Ogs. Paul Cosse introduced this town of Athens to pétanque, which is a French form of sort of, what is that, bocce kind of ball. There's a pétanque court down here on the campus. There's one next to the new restaurant Buvette, right? So we created a league, and we challenged the French embassy in Atlanta, and they came up. Did we win? We did win. Okay. I'm not competitive. So in between time-based objects, time-based projects, time-based activities, I brought the same kind of verb to the in-between times, because I started thinking that work and play were two things, but what happened in between? And I wanted to connect them tremendously and overlap them. So, yeah. This was a big exhibit in Atlanta Contemporary. So like I said, sometimes it's a struggle for some arts organizations to show my work, because it encourages not just touching, but people getting on and swinging and skateboarding, to the point where I had to design parking spaces for the boards so that people knew where to put them so that they would stay in their nice little sort of Carl Andre arrangement, all lined up and nice. That guy is. I know Louise. Those were some of those balance boards with the bird list. In there. So again, I created kind of a team that were the playground managers or monitors, playscape overseers, with the idea that there would be a group of people looking, at all of the activities, so that no one was swinging too long and let someone else have a turn, or maybe don't push so hard if it goes too high because they might not like it. Be sure to get off the seesaw together cooperatively, and they would have whistles. So if any, hoo-ha was going on, they would get whistled. So those were some of my monitors for that particular piece. So yes, respectful and courteous play. So these were the first design objects, the inside skate, and I had a great time playing with these as they sort of hovered over an object of art and then an object of design. I was super thrilled because first my inspiration was because of our Athens skate park needed to raise money to build out some of the half pikes and the domes down there. And we got very excited, raised money for it, and then Tony Hawk came, and that's Bam Margera. Oh my God. Loving my skateboard, loving up my skateboards. So yeah, and that's Jason Thrasher riding, and as you can see, because they're upholstered vinyl and cushy, you had to ride them barefooted, right, to keep the grip. Anyway, I have in my office at the Art Center one of the boards that Bam signed for me. This is very exciting. These were the new versions of the seesaws, so the engineering, it wasn't bound to the ground anymore, like, you know, in a playground system. These had the arc on the bottom, so these were water jet cut aluminum bases, and then the handlebars at the end. And these were the lovely ladies of Agnes Scott during one of the events, and they were my playground monitors there. But I don't know, they got a little wild, so I don't know if they were doing their job. This was, I want to say this was the Jacksonville Museum, but this was one of the solutions that a museum would come up with. At this museum, the Jacksonville in Florida, it was super fun because I worked with the museum security, the preparator's office, and all of the guards very extensively to explain the, you know, all of the pieces, what the parameters were, and it was wonderful to leverage all of their interest and cooperation into, you know, what is other kind of a chaotic museum environment. This is the conversation chair that's based after the Victorian courting chair. So when you're sitting in it with your friend, you can have intimate conversation without the body holding each other. Longboards, went into longboards. Over in that corner is a joggling board. So the seesaw is a pretty raucous ride, you know, this. The joggling board is a more general ride, a sort of a gliding. So I did a number of shows at the International Contemporary Furniture Fair in New York. And it was very exciting because, again, I felt like I was pulling the wool over their eyes. Like I was an artist, like making these installations, and oh, well, they're also design objects. One fellow bought, I think, 12 inside skates, and he uses them for his seating for dinner around the coffee table. So, you know, whatever. In addition, I would do these giveaways, which I have for us today as well, that reflected the nature of being kinetic and in a process, in a production, in a verb, being the viewed rather than just the viewer, a more active engagement in the creative practice. So for instance, I think for this one I made a flip book of me swinging, so people would come and then they'd go off and they'd be all going like this. It was so great, and I think these were like church fans. I was trying to remember what the other things were. But anyway, so it was another way, it was fun to use graphics and promotion to further the mission of what I was engaged in. Oh, here's my vanity page. It's only just a few. So yeah, I didn't, you know, I got a lot of like stuff in the whatever. Again, pulling the wool over one's eye. This one was a fun project because I was commissioned by Vogue to do those flower skateboards. Now, those are like real wood skateboards, you know, they're not the padded ones. But it was for Marc Jacobs, what is it, resort line. Okay, so I got a little obsessed. I made a Carrara marble longboard, worked with a ceramic factory in Deruta, Italy, to create that skateboard. You can't ride on it, but you could put your cheeses and your salamis on it and roll it down the big table. The woman who had made that, they had never done a skateboard before, but she had been painting that Draco, the dragons, for 35 years. So it was really fun to interface with that community, laser etched plexi. And again, how they sit in an environment in a design field. So all the while I'm watching a lot of TV and making embroideries. And these are a series that connect to videos about girls playing. playing together. There's one about Rush, as we all know, that delightful thing that happens on Millage, and some other sort of games. And this one on the bottom was turned into a play card for Athica to celebrate and to fund some of their activities. And this is what you would get. So you might want to guess what my card was in the playing deck. Ooh, kaleidoscope. I collect a lot of sound from different places. That's the blinker, the turn signal on a Penske truck. How many? There you go. So I was a 5 of hearts in a big deck of cards for a fundraiser for Athica. Okay, Desi mentioned this, Betsy for a Day. I loved Betsy Johnson, I still do. It was in celebration of her 70th birthday on an occasion in which she did a number of cartwheels to show off. Hooray. So I had been wearing Betsy Johnson dresses for 35 years, and I've saved all of them, and I was so happy I could put them on, and that was really, really good. And, but I didn't have enough for a birthday month, so I had to start calling my friends to ask them if they had Betsy Johnson outfits, and they sent them to me, so I got to wear their clothes. So the idea was that I could play dress up. And if you wore, during that month, one of those QR stickers, you could play dress up with me. So on any day, if you were wearing that, you could scan it and you could see the outfit that I was wearing. So essentially, you would be wearing my clothes at the same time. So it was this kind of extended sort of play activity of dress up. So there's some of them. Oh my God. It was a result of that first residency at Hambidge that I told you that I was outside in the woods. And it was, again, a wonderful experience. The first thing that happened when I arrived, I was handed a bell, and it was for bears. And I'm like, what? No, thank you. Well, I guess the black bears are very friendly, and they like to come around. And I said, well, what do I do? When they come, they said, well, if you ring the bell, they'll let you know, they'll know that you're there. I'm like, okay, well, that's great. Well, I was sad not to ever see a bear. So what I did with the bell is I made a very big necklace for a bear. So next time if I'm out in the woods and I see one, I could give the bear the necklace, and it's Swarovski crystals. It's very elegant. So this was a series of works and videos about playing outdoors. This was my campfire. That's my garden. Those are my fences. Those were my fairy, what do I call that? Fairy rings, mushrooms that I put stickers all over because I was told by my grandmother not to go into the mushroom circle because the fairies would take you, so I still don't do that. So I put stickers around only on the outside of the fairy ring. This was a skateboard show that I curated at Indigo. So again, this idea like the to-do list or giving sculpture pieces to a museum professional, inviting, using people as my material, essentially. That was sort of what brought all of this together, is that like we can have work and we can have play, but it's no fun to do that by yourself. So moving from a performance field where I was the solo performance and there was an audience and there was me, and then eventually through my practice moved through this process of wanting to be working with, playing with people. So that continues in my mentoring and teaching, it continues in my curation, and it continues in my practice. This is an exhibit that I did at the Linden House Art Center, Where We Live, Work, and Play was the title, and I got that little beauty from a marketing conference where this guy from some CVB kept saying, "Where we live, work, and play." I'm like, well, I'll take that, I like that. So these were artists that made tools, made surfboard, fashioning sites, clocks. There's a surfboard. This woman was training to be a marathon runner. That is a book that's a mile long with her GPS route. This is Tad Glockler. He is a faculty member in interior design. This is a very elaborate machine that cuts an apple. So, and I think there's like 100 steps to get to the actual cutting of the apple. Desi mentioned the glass cube, which is a really fun curatorial space for me. It's a collaboration space. It collaborates with the artists that I commission, with the site, because it is this bizarre glass box on the corner. It's light controlled, it's climate controlled, and each time the pieces have to evolve into something between day and night, and that's a really big, thing to tackle, to make something that is gorgeous in the day in the raking sunlight where everything is washed out, to at nighttime where it's sort of highlighted like a little jewel. So each time it's super fun. This is Lisa Lott Johnson. She was in Madison. Garrett Hayes. Currently Lucha Rodriguez. Martin Van Wagdendonk, he's a professor in arts here. Tom Hauser, also another professor, and it's changing up again in mid-May, and Jamie Bull is the next commissioned artist. Yay, Jamie! And it comes with it's a mini residency, is how I think of it. So if you're from out of town, you can stay in the hotel and you get an honorarium. So it's very fun, and it's a model that so many other businesses locally should adopt. So, yeah, so here's your assignment. So you're out at Georgia Theater for a show. It's 2 o'clock, done. You're hungry. You go to Little Italy. You get a slice. And then you go look at some art 24/7 at the Indigo. And this is where I am at the moment, and you guys are going to help me with this today. I just created a project that has to do with luck and trying to build luck and chance and using everyone, people around, to elevate everyone's opportunity towards luck, good luck. So I made, these are performance objects, performative objects, and I can't believe I squealed over in Atlanta to a corner because I saw somebody spinning a sign. Well, I met the competitive national winner of sign spinning. Okay, I'm training with him. Okay, so I'm going to learn how to spin the signs, and each of those signs have different good fortunes on them. And of course, the cootie catcher, right? And the lucky numbers. So I'm hoping that you all will come and take a cootie catcher home. And this has the manila, so you can fill in your own fortunes and play with your friends. And then I have polka dot stickers. I have one lucky number print. This is my second print. Isn't that nice? So I figured if everyone has a lucky number in their head, they can come and put it on the number, and then we'll all win something. What? I don't know. But we'll win. So we'll have good fortune. So with that, I'll just say thank you. Thank you so much.